The weather-beaten trail wound ahead into the dust-raked climes of the barren land which dominates large portions of the Norgolian Empire. Small rodents scampered about, occupying themselves in the daily accomplishments of their dismal lives.
As a man of science, it wouldn't be very empirically minded of me to declare a work of fiction the worst story ever written. But the 1970 fantasy novella The Eye of Argon by the 16-year-old Jim Tice makes a strong case for the title. In less than 50 pages, Tice's postmodernist classic shatters all conventional rules of narrative, sentence structure, and punctuation. The story follows the perilous adventure of Grigna the Barbarian, a hulking warrior with emerald green orbs and a shock of fiery red hair tossing in the humid air currents. Grigna's love interest, an amorous female by the name of Carthena, is a worldly beauty, with stringy orchard twines of hair swaying gracefully over the lithe, opaque nose. Scholars believe that Tice wrote The Eye of Argon by smashing the keys of a typewriter with the flat end of a thesaurus. The phrase purple prose does not cut it. The Eye of Argon is ultraviolet prose, gamma radiation prose. The sort of prose that gives you stage 7 cancer of the ghoulies. The word said appears only 5 times in the entire story, likely in a noble attempt to avoid repetition. The characters of Tice's epic are too grand to merely say things. The author employs every synonym for the word said in the English language. The word saith is used twice, both times incorrectly.
Confronting the group was a short, stocky man, seated upon a golden throne. "Down on your knees, lout, and pay proper homage to your sovereign," commanded the pudgy noble of Grigna. "By the surly beard of Marifk, Grigna kneels to no man!"
"I'm going to have to go back in time and find who did this painting and what it means."
Throughout the text, Tice playfully contradicts himself with Joycean abandon, often in the space of a single sentence. Characters cushion their bare feet with plush red felt slippers. Their faces flush pale, then pastily light up to a lustrous cherry-red radiance. Tice's command of the English language is unmatched in the annals of history. William Shakespeare may have coined over 1,700 words, but we have Jim Tice to thank for expungisively, Yorkishly, and protubrating. Object teleports from hand to hand, an inconsistency that might throw a bit of a spanner in the works for any Netflix executives that might be watching. I mean, might as well adapt it, God knows I can't butcher anything worse than Avatar. The text is accompanied by 5 beautiful illustrations, masterfully rendered by Tice's friend J.T. Rickosh. All of the pieces are untitled and are inserted at seemingly random places throughout the story, but each tells a visual tale of its own. The Queen of Stars, a topless woman with the bone structure of Michael Jackson, a fat prince smoking a suitably fat blunt, a Doctor Strange cosplayer whose eyes have been surgically transplanted into their nostrils, and the ick. Dramatised readings of The Eye of Argon have been staples of sci-fi conventions since the Nixon administration. A printout is passed in a circle from person to person after each page. Each line, typos and all, must be read in their entirety with a stone-cold poker face. For an added degree of challenge, some participants may force themselves to start each paragraph with a nice deep breath from a helium balloon. While little is known about Tice's life or his writing process, we do know that his magnum opus was first published in issue number 10 of Osfan, a small fanzine produced by the Ozark Science Fiction Association of St. Louis, Missouri. But for those of you wishing to dig a little deeper, I should warn you there's a fair bit of misinformation online about the Eye of Argon's history. The front cover of a common PDF replication says that Osfan 10 was published in November, but the very next page lists the publication date as August 21st. The TV tropes page for The Eye of Argon isn't free of errors either, as it erroneously says that the story was first published in Osfan issue 7, not 10. Still, even with the misinformation, I can happily inform the nerds among you that trustworthy sources are available provided you know where to look. The nerds of the early 2000s, unfortunately, were not so lucky. Back then, the origins of the Eye of Argon were completely shrouded in mystery. The authors of Osfan had long since moved on to other endeavours, and the only known copy of the Eye of Argon was missing its last page. For decades, the story was doomed to end on an unintentional cliffhanger, with Grigna locked in combat with a dastardly slime monster. It wasn't even clear if Jim Tice was a real person. Some believed the story was a deliberate parody of campy fantasy novels, a joke thrown together by a group of university students in the early 70s. Surely, no one could earnestly write something this ass. but those that doubted Jim Tice's literary genius would soon eat their words. Against all odds, an original copy of Osfan No. 10, last page and all, surfaced in late 2009. 39 years after its publication, the last page of Tice's masterpiece was recovered. After watching the slime monster sluice up his leg and drain him of his life fluid, Grigna plunges a flaming torch into the monster's maw, causing it to degenerate into a leprosy of avaricious lust, leaving naught behind but a dark red blotch on the face of the earth, blotching things up. The story ends with Grigna stealing a horse and carrying Carthena away over his shoulder, never to be seen again.
The weary, scarred barbarian drifted slowly off into the horizon to become a tiny pinpoint in a filtered field of swirling blue mists, leaving the nobles, soldiers, and peasants to replace the missing monarch. Long live the king!
Okay, let's drop the act here. The Eye of Argon is an atrocious story. Its very existence is an affront to the laws of good taste. It is a monument to literary ineptitude, a bronze statue of a Labrador squatting arse first over a typewriter, its hind legs hunched as it squeezes out a steaming turd onto the keyboard. It is, without a doubt, one of the worst works of fiction ever written. So why do I love it?
Dismiss your hand from the hilt, barbarian, or you shall find a foot of steel sheathed in your gizzard.
I have a soft spot for schlock. There is just something wonderfully earnest about cheesy films and books that you just don't get in other media. Now, let me be clear, there is a distinction between schlock and bad writing. The Eye of Argon, The Room, and Diana the Musical are schlock. Jack and Jill, The Rise of Skywalker, and every episode of Sherlock Season 4 are just bad works of fiction. But what, I hear you ask, is the difference? Now, my background is in chemistry. I haven't taken a humanities lesson since my GCSEs, and my critical palate was largely shaped by pirating awful films throughout my early 20s. In other words, I'm vastly overqualified by the standards of this godforsaken hell site. To further the scholarly analysis of schlock, I have constructed an empirical framework for its identification. Like all great academics, I have named this framework after myself, skipped peer review in favour of sharing my work directly with the public, and will henceforth insist that my framework is superior to the other 50 frameworks that may or may not already exist for this very purpose. Wouldn't know. Haven't checked.
1. Is it trying and failing to be cool, scary, or sexy?
When a writer fails to invoke the reaction they want from the audience, you can still get some entertainment value from the work. Bad horror and bad action films can still be entertaining, because even if they aren't scary or cool, you can still laugh at them. Bad comedies do not have this lifeline. I remember watching the 2019 version of Cats with a friend, a film I regrettably suggested as fodder for our Friday movie night. For the first few songs, we were having a great time. We were slapping our knees, hootering and hollering at how wonderfully dreadful the CGI was, but the second that James Corden and Rebel Wilson came on screen, the mood curdled. The jokes were awful. The music was awful. The rest of the film was spent in stunned silence, as our feeble brains tried to comprehend the sheer comedic ineptitude that was on screen. To this day, Cats 2019 remains one of the worst movies I have ever seen in my life. Now, I'm no Roger Ebert, but here's my tagline for the Blu-ray in case they re-release it. Watch Cats 2019. It's as entertaining an experience as watching a finger puppet show about the euthanasia of a beloved childhood pet.
2. Is the creator blissfully unaware of their own ineptitude?
To this day, Tommy Wiseau insists that he made The Room as a straight-faced romantic drama. If the writer is deliberately trying to make something cheesy or poorly written, the final product isn't schlock. It's parody. Admittedly, this can be entertaining if it's done well enough, but you have to be funny. There was a wave of deliberately campy movies in this vein throughout the early 2010s that tried and failed to do this, and it probably explains why maybe 5 people have thought about them in the last decade. It's low-hanging fruit. The true auteur of the schlock world is painfully sincere. There is a completely unearned confidence in their work, but any irony-poisoned zoomer with a phone and a pirated copy of Sony Vegas can fart out a deliberately terrible film in about 5 minutes. Just because you're in on the joke does not mean it's entertaining to watch.
3. Does the medium lend itself well to schlock?
You might have noticed that for a film about a fantasy novella, I've talked a lot about movies. This is because, in my opinion, film is one of the best mediums for schlock. Making a movie is hard and expensive, and it's very easy for amateurs to cock things up in entertaining ways. For the physical scientists among you, Tate's third law states that the schlock factor of a piece of art, usually measured in pico-schlocks, is inversely proportional to the amount of effort that must be exerted to engage with it. Bad video games wear thin pretty quickly, because if you want to get a laugh out of the cheesy dialogue or bad graphics, you still have to play through the entire thing for 30 to 40 hours. Alternatively, you can just stick a bad film on, get a Chinese out, and just tune in for the entertaining bits over some crispy seaweed. Poetry is another good medium for bite-sized bursts of schlock. Regional British newspapers are goldmines for this stuff. But more generally, I actually think that written works of fiction are at a disadvantage here, especially longer ones. Poems can be rattled off in less than a minute. Stories, not so much. Once a piece of schlock approaches the length of a 250-page book, the entertainment to time ratio starts looking a little bit scary. I heard of this Super Smash Bros. Fanfic that's 6 times longer than War and Peace, and I don't care how funny or cringy the dialogue is. I'm not reading that. I have more important things to do. Like making videos about the goddamn Eye of Argon. The Eye of Argon satisfies these laws with flying colours. It's definitely trying and failing to be cool and sexy. From what little we know of his life, it's unlikely that Jim Tice was in on the joke. And for a story, the Eye of Argon is short enough to lend itself well to group readings and live performances.
"Thou hast need to occupy your time, barbarian," questioned the female. The engrossed Titan ignored the queries of the inquisitive female, pulling her towards him and crushing her sagging nipples to his yearning chest. "You make love well, wench," admitted.
By every conceivable metric, the Eye of Argon is a terrible work of fiction. But on some level, I can't help but respect Jim Tice for bringing it into the world. Tice was only 16 when the Eye of Argon was accepted for publication, and 17 when it was printed. For a time, he was probably really proud of his accomplishment. Which begs the question, is there something a bit mean-spirited about all of this? The cult following of the Eye of Argon has been traced to a letter exchange between Thomas N. Scotia and Chelsea Quinn Yarbrough. Both went on to be modestly successful writers, Scotia in science fiction and Yarbrough in historical horror. Scotia was so amused by Tice's terrible story that he sent a copy of Osfan No. 10 to Yarbrough in 1971. Here is an example of fine writing that we might all enjoy. This must be a nom de plume of L.S. de Camp. Fascinated by Tice's tale, Yarbrough loaned out her copy of the Eye of Argon to everyone she could. Before long, dramatic readings of the tale of Grigner had become an institution of the California fantasy and sci-fi scene. Yarbrough's copy was in such high demand that her then husband prepared an ASCII transcript of the story, typos and all, which he then carefully stored on an 8-inch floppy disk. Copies of the file spread across California like a plague of locusts. Readings of the Eye of Argon even made it onto local radio. Word made its way back to Tice that his name was a laughingstock. In a 1984 interview that has since been lost to the mists of time, Tice expressed bitterness over the continued mockery of his work. He declared to the world that he would never write anything else ever again. And sadly, it seems that he kept true to his word. The Eye of Argon was the only work of fiction that Tice ever shared with the world. He died on the 26th of March 2002, at only 48 years old. Now I just feel bad. Is there something a little discourteous about grown men and women ripping the piss out of a story written by a kid that was barely old enough to shave? Kind of, yeah. There's an unpleasant tendency in geek circles for people to scoff at media that might be considered cringe. A lot of nerds, especially those on the spectrum, get bullied as kids for liking stuff their peers consider gay or babyish. I think that experience can make people overly critical of media that gives the rest of us a bad name, if that makes any sense. If you aren't cool, there's a dark allure in punching down at someone even less cool than you, especially if they're completely oblivious to their cringiness. What's this? A disabled person with unmonitored internet access wrote terrible fanfiction about Princess Peach marrying their My Little Pony OC? Oh, how novel. I, a cultured video games enjoyer, only write cool nerd stuff. like this post on Kiwi Farms with his name and address. Wow, Max, I hope the air isn't too thin on top of that high horse. Okay, point taken, I'm as guilty as the rest of you. I'm just saying at least Jim Tice had the stones to share something with the rest of us. Getting something published, even if it's just in a fanzine or a local newspaper, and even if it's not very good, is a genuinely impressive feat for a high school student. What work of art will you be remembered for, funny bones? The acrostic poem you wrote for your mum in year 6? For better or worse, I have never read anything like The Eye of Argon. It's pretty short, and you can find it online for free. The science fiction writer David Langford wrote an excellent article on the history of The Eye of Argon. I've left a link to a PDF in the description with both the story and a copy of Langford's article, so check it out if you have nothing better to do. Should be a given, really, you won't be watching this otherwise. Hey, it's been a minute, huh? Sorry about that. I'm in the last year of my PhD, and I've been slogging away at my thesis, so thank you all for your patience in the run-up to the deadline. For those of you that are interested, I draw cool pictures and write little behind-the-scenes posts for my Patreons, so if you want to support the channel, I've put a link in the description. Big thank you to
Jack and Kyan
for their wonderful narration, and to all of the musicians whose work I shamelessly pinched. Likes and comments are always appreciated, so please let me know if there's any more stories you want me to cover. Nothing too long, please, I'm very frail.